At 9:18 in the evening, 2 days ago, the President of the United States posted a message on social media that no American president has ever posted in the history of the Republic. 1,000 missiles are locked and loaded and aimed at the Islamic Republic of Iran, targeting the regime. Orders have already been given, and the U.S. military is ready, willing, and able, for a 1-year period of time, subject to extension, to completely decimate and destroy all areas of Iran. 1,000 missiles, orders already given. A 1-year operational commitment already authorized, posted publicly, with his name on it, directed at a regime whose supreme leader had just issued his own message from a bunker somewhere inside Iran via a Telegram account. A man who has not been seen in public in 135 days, who did not attend his own father's funeral, who communicates exclusively through written posts on a messaging application because appearing in public is something that is no longer safe for him to do. That is the exchange that defines this moment. A telegram post from a bunker versus 1,000 missiles with orders already given. And the gap between those two things is the operational reality of where this conflict stands right now. But let us back all the way up, because to understand why Trump's response was what it was, and why the language of the Khamenei telegram statement is more revealing about the current state of the Islamic Republic than anything that has been officially acknowledged, you need to read what was actually written in that message. Not the headline version, not the paraphrase, but the specific words chosen by whoever composed it from whatever location they composed it, and understand what those words reveal about the person or persons who wrote them. The telegram statement attributed to Mojtaba Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, who has not made a single verified public appearance since the February 28th strikes, read as follows: "These criminals whose names are known from top to bottom will take to their graves the unfulfilled wish of dying peacefully in their beds. The revenge is the demand of our nation, and it will most certainly be carried out. They should know that this does not depend on my personal presence, or that of any other official. Whether we are here or not, this will be accomplished. And soon, freedom-loving people throughout the world will each carry out part of this divine mission." Read that statement once, then read it again, and pay specific attention to 3 phrases, because each one of them is more revealing than the regime intended. The first phrase, "This does not depend on my personal presence." In a statement issued by a sitting head of state about military and political operations conducted by the government they lead, you would not typically include a disclaimer about whether your personal presence is required. Personal presence is assumed in the exercise of state authority. You lead, you direct, your presence is the point. The only reason to include a specific disclaimer saying the operation does not depend on your personal presence is if your personal presence is genuinely in question. If there is a real possibility that you may not be present, may not be capable of presence, or may already not be present in any meaningful sense, this is not rhetorical humility. This is a contingency statement. It is the language of a person or an institution preparing an audience for the revelation that the figure who signed the statement is not going to be making future appearances. The second phrase, or that of any other official. This is the phrase that most directly addresses the pattern of leadership elimination that has defined the last several weeks of this conflict. Level 1 of the Iranian leadership is gone. Level 2 is gone. Level 3 is dispersed in bunkers and functioning as a fragmented shadow of a command structure. The statement is acknowledging, explicitly in the Supreme Leader's own attributed words, that multiple officials have been removed from the picture and that the operation continues regardless. This is not defiance. This is a succession statement dressed as defiance. It is saying that the organization does not require its current leadership to continue because the leadership has already been planning for its own absence. The third phrase, freedom-loving people throughout the world will each carry out part of this divine mission. This is the phrase that translates the assassination plot, the kill list, the Vahidi-directed Quds Force order, and the $100 million bounty into a single theological frame. Freedom-loving people in the vocabulary of the Islamic Republic's revolutionary ideology are not liberal democratic citizens seeking self-determination. They are the proxies, the militia members, the sleeper cells, the ideologically motivated individuals scattered across the globe who identify with the communist revolutionary project. The statement is instructing them to act, not to wait for orders, not to coordinate through official channels, to act independently, each carrying out a fragment of a larger mission in a decentralized operational model that is specifically designed to make attribution and interdiction more difficult. This is not a statement about political resistance. This is operational direction delivered through theological language to an audience that understands exactly what it means. Trump read all of that, and at 9:18 in the evening, he responded with 1,000 missiles. But before we get to the missiles, let us address the question that sits underneath the telegram statement, and that is more important than anything written in it. Who actually composed this message, and is the person it is attributed to still alive in any meaningful operational sense? The confirmed public record on Mojtaba Khamenei's condition is more specific than the mainstream coverage has reflected. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth confirmed on record that Mojtaba Khamenei is wounded and likely disfigured following the February 28th strikes. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard testified before the White House Intelligence Committee that he was very seriously wounded. U.S. officials who spoke to press privately added a precise and revealing framing. They said they do not believe the Iranians would go through all this trouble to install a dead man as supreme leader, but acknowledged simultaneously that they have no proof he's at the helm. That framing is worth holding carefully. It is not a confirmation that he is alive and directing operations. It is the absence of evidence for the most extreme possibility combined with the absence of evidence that he is capable of actually governing. The U.S. intelligence community's official position is uncertainty. And in the context of a head of state who has not appeared publicly in 135 days, who did not attend his own father's funeral, and whose government has used AI-generated video content to simulate his delivery of messages, uncertainty about whether he is alive is not a minor analytical footnote. It is the central command authority question of the entire conflict. Iranian state media's use of AI-generated videos to portray Khamenei delivering statements is the most technically significant detail to emerge about the information management operation surrounding his condition. Generating a convincing AI video of a specific named person delivering a specific message requires high-quality source material, sophisticated generative tools, and a decision at a senior level of the state media apparatus to deploy synthetic content rather than real footage. That decision is not made lightly. It is made when real footage is unavailable, when the person cannot be filmed in a condition that would be acceptable for public release. The alternative explanation, that AI-generated video was chosen over real footage for aesthetic or logistical reasons, is not consistent with how authoritarian governments manage their leadership's public image. You film the leader when the leader is filmable. When you instead generate a synthetic version of the leader delivering a message, it is because the real leader cannot be filmed delivering it in a state that would serve the regime's interests. Now, let us establish the confirmed operational picture as of today, July 13th, 2026, across every dimension of the pressure being applied to the Islamic Republic simultaneously. The U.S. government has taken 3 simultaneous actions in the past 48 hours that, together, represent the most comprehensive single-day escalation of pressure on the Iranian regime in the history of the conflict. First, the revocation of Iran's oil sale license, the general license that had been allowing Iranian crude to move through nominally legitimate commercial channels, was executed and confirmed, removing the revenue mechanism that has been sustaining the regime's financial operations during the conflict. Second, fresh targeted sanctions were placed specifically on the financial network surrounding Mojtaba Khamenei personally, the inner circle of individuals managing the assets, the accounts, the financial infrastructure that keeps the supreme leader's institutional apparatus functioning regardless of his physical condition or location. These are not broad sectoral sanctions. They are precision financial strikes directed at named individuals in the specific network that surrounds the person at the top of the Iranian command structure. Third, the U.S. military delivered a formal ultimatum. Iran has 24 hours to fully and verifiably open the Strait of Hormuz to unrestricted commercial navigation or face consequences that the 1,000-missile Truth Social post has framed with considerable specificity. And then there is the declaration that the Versailles Memorandum of Understanding, the agreement signed on June 11th that was supposed to have ended the military exchange and established a framework for a negotiated resolution, is effectively over. Trump declared the deal dead. The ceasefire that was never fully a ceasefire, that Iran used to rebuild radar networks and attack commercial shipping while negotiating, has been formally abandoned as a diplomatic framework. There is no active agreement governing the conduct of either side. There are only capabilities, ultimatums, and the operational reality of a military posture in which 1,000 missiles have orders already attached to them. This is the baseline from which everything that follows must be understood. Now let us address the military architecture of what 1,000 missiles aimed at the Islamic Republic actually means in operational terms, because the number is large enough to require unpacking, and because understanding the specific platforms, munitions, and targeting logic reveals something about the strategic objectives of such a strike that the raw number does not communicate on its own. The delivery architecture for a strike package of this scale draws from every capable platform currently in the theater and several that are positioned beyond it. The carrier strike groups operating in the Gulf provide the airborne component. F-18E and F-18F Super Hornets off the USS Abraham Lincoln, confirmed operating in the Gulf, and confirmed to have been actively loading ordnance and running strike drills even during the periods when diplomatic teams were working the phones. These aircraft carry GBU-38 JDAM precision bombs for fixed targets, AGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles for coastal naval infrastructure, and joint air-to-surface standoff missiles, JOASM, for the high-value, deeply defended targets that require standoff engagement from beyond the range of Iranian surface-to-air missiles. The JASSM gives the Super Hornet and the F-15E Strike Eagle something that earlier generations of strike aircraft did not have: the ability to put a precision warhead on a hardened target without entering the threat envelope of the air defense system protecting it. The F-16CJ Wild Weasel packages lead every strike wave into defended Iranian airspace for the same reason they have led every strike wave since the beginning of this campaign. They suppress the surface-to-air missile networks that would otherwise threaten the strike aircraft following behind them. Iran's surviving air defense architecture, the Russian-built SA-20 Gargoyle systems, the M1 SAMs, the Iranian-built Bavar 373 long-range surface-to-air missile that is Tehran's most capable indigenous air defense platform, constitutes one of the most layered air defense environments in the Middle East, even in its current degraded state. You do not send a strike package into that environment without the Wild Weasels going first, hunting the radar emissions, sending harm missiles down the electronic throat of every system that illuminates. The F-16CJ pilots who fly the Wild Weasel mission are doing exactly what the name describes. They go in first, they draw the fire, they find the shooters, and they kill the shooters, so the strike aircraft behind them can work in a degraded threat environment rather than a fully active one. The F-15E Strike Eagle brings the heaviest precision payload in the package: GBU-31 2,000-pound bombs for reinforced targets, GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, 30,000-pound weapons specifically engineered to drive through meters of reinforced concrete and detonate deep inside hardened underground facilities for targets that no other conventional munition can reach. The GBU-57 exists for one category of target that no other weapon in the conventional arsenal can address: deeply buried, hardened facilities like the underground nuclear enrichment infrastructure at Fordo and Natanz. Trump's statement that Iran can either provide what he called the nuclear dust or face low-cost military options to ensure enrichment remains buried underground forever is the clearest public statement any American president has made about the GBU-57's place in the Iran targeting picture. The nuclear enrichment facilities are inside the target set. The GBU-57 is in the available inventory. The reference to ensuring things remain buried underground forever is a technical description of what the GBU-57 does to a hardened underground facility when it performs as designed. The vertical launch systems aboard the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and the Virginia-class submarines operating in the region provide the standoff component of the strike package: Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from sea, flying at low altitude below Iranian radar coverage, carrying 1,000-pound warheads to pre-planned aim points that do not require an aircraft to enter Iranian airspace at all. The SM-2 and SM-6 missiles loaded in those same VLS systems provide the ballistic missile defense layer that protects the fleet and the regional partner bases from the Iranian ballistic missile inventory, the one remaining significant capability that the IRGC possesses and would almost certainly employ in response to a strike of the scale Trump described. The APKWS, Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System, represents a specific capability addition that has become increasingly relevant as the IRGC's fast attack boat and drone inventory has been degraded. The APKWS converts standard unguided rockets into precision laser-guided munitions at a cost of approximately $20,000 per round, compared to the $25,000 to $30,000 that an Iranian Shahed drone costs to manufacture and deploy. The math of that exchange is significant. For every Iranian drone shot down with an APKWS, the cost equation favors the American side. That cost asymmetry, multiplied across the hundreds of drone engagements that have occurred in this campaign, is itself a form of financial attrition being imposed on the IRGC's drone inventory budget. The IRGC Navy has lost more than 60 fast attack boats in the last week. 60. The fast attack boat is the IRGC Navy's primary offensive instrument in the Strait of Hormuz, the platform through which the harassment of commercial shipping, the threatening of tankers, and the projection of Iranian presence across the choke point has been conducted for decades. Losing 60 of them in a single week of strikes represents a degradation of the IRGC Navy's strait capability that will take years and significant resources to reconstitute, if it is ever reconstituted at all, given the financial pressure simultaneously being applied to every revenue channel the regime possesses. U.S. mine clearance operations are also confirmed ongoing in the strait, systematically removing the mining threat that the IRGC has used as a passive anti-shipping instrument, extending the degradation of Iranian strait control beyond the kinetic strike campaign into the unglamorous but operationally critical work of making the water safe to transit. Now let us address the intelligence revelation that is the most strategically significant analytical development of the entire conflict, the one that changes the analytical frame through which everything else must be understood, and that the mainstream coverage has almost entirely failed to examine with the seriousness it demands. Iranian officials privately admitted to CNN that the commercial shipping attacks in the Strait of Hormuz that triggered the current escalation came from what they described as an errant sect of hardliners attempting to undermine the ongoing negotiations. Read that again. Because the full weight of what that admission contains requires a moment to absorb. The Islamic Republic of Iran, through back-channel communication to an American media outlet, acknowledged that the military action that triggered 170 American strikes across 48 hours, that killed named IRGC generals, that cratered Bushehr runways, that destroyed 60-plus fast attack boats, that drew the Arab states into direct military action against Iranian territory, that produced a 1,000-missile ultimatum from the American president. That action was not ordered by the government of Iran. It was executed by a faction within the IRGC that was acting in direct opposition to the diplomatic track that the Iranian government was simultaneously pursuing through Qatar and Oman. This is not a small revelation. This is the central strategic fact of the entire conflict. The entity making targeting decisions in the Strait of Hormuz is not the entity signing diplomatic agreements in Doha. They are not the same institution. They are not operating on the same orders. They are actively working against each other. One faction seeking a negotiated outcome that preserves some version of the regime, another faction executing military operations that destroy the conditions under which any negotiated outcome remains possible. And the United States government has been responding to the military actions of the hardline faction with strikes that are landing on the entire Iranian military apparatus, including on the faction that is simultaneously trying to negotiate a way out. This is why the analytical picture of who controls Iran right now matters so much more than any individual strike count or casualty figure. You cannot sign a ceasefire with a government that cannot enforce it on its own military. You cannot negotiate a deal with a negotiating partner who does not control the armed faction that is blowing up the deal from inside. And you cannot trust a telegram statement from a supreme leader who has not been seen publicly in 135 days, who reportedly communicates through AI-generated video content according to information that has reached U.S. officials, and whose physical condition has been confirmed by the U.S. Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence to involve serious wounds and likely disfigurement. Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, Parliament Speaker, former IRGC Air Force commander, current chief negotiator for the Iranian side, is the figure who now sits at the most dangerous intersection in Iranian political life. He is simultaneously the man running Iran's diplomatic track, seeking a deal through Qatari and Omani intermediaries, and the man who must maintain the support of IRGC generals who regard any sign of diplomatic accommodation as institutional weakness. His public statements, that the era of bullying and extortion is over, that Iran does not fold, are not expressions of his personal belief that Iran is winning. They are expressions of the political position he must maintain to retain any authority over the hardline military faction that is actively undermining his negotiating position. If Ghalibaf signals flexibility publicly, the IRGC hardliners use that signal to marginalize him inside the internal power competition. If Ghalibaf signals defiance publicly, he feeds the rhetorical justification for the military escalation that is destroying Iran's military capability and cutting off its revenue. He is trapped between two institutional imperatives that cannot be simultaneously satisfied, operating as both the diplomatic track and the military command structure in a situation where those two tracks are running in directly opposite directions. His background as a former IRGC Air Force commander is critically important for understanding why he cannot simply override the hardline military faction through the authority of his current position. He knows these generals. He came from their institution. He understands their logic and their institutional culture in ways that civilian politicians cannot. And he understands precisely why they will not subordinate their operational independence to a negotiating track that they believe represents surrender. The IRGC's institutional identity is built on the principle that it does not capitulate. The generals commanding its operational factions, including the Qatam al-Anbiya headquarters that has been issuing its own independent threats against Gulf nations hosting American bases, did not build their careers by accommodating American pressure. They built their careers by resisting it, by projecting force through the strait, by funding and directing proxy networks across the region. Asking them to stand down and allow a diplomat to sign a deal that restricts those functions is not something they will do because Ghalibaf asks them to. It is something they would only do if ordered by a supreme leader with the unquestioned authority to enforce compliance. And the current supreme leader is in a bunker, possibly incapacitated, communicating through telegram and AI-generated video content while the generals do what they were built to do. The IRGC Qatam al-Anbiya headquarters, the central operational command of the IRGC, has issued its own statements threatening Gulf nations that host American military bases. That statement did not come from Ghalibaf's negotiating track. It came from the military command structure. It came from the faction that is looking at the loss of 60 fast attack boats, the degradation of radar networks, the killing of named generals across multiple cities, and the 1,000-missile ultimatum from the American president, and responding with threats directed at the nations, hosting the forces that generated all of that damage. This is not a unified government managing a crisis with a coherent strategy. This is two institutional factions within the same government making incompatible decisions simultaneously and hoping the international community does not notice the contradiction. The international community has noticed. Now let us address the three pressure tracks operating against Tehran today, updated for the developments of the past 48 hours, because the picture has evolved and the evolution matters. The military track has entered its most explicitly nuclear signaling phase with Trump's direct statement about the enrichment facilities. 1,000 missiles with orders already given. The nuclear enrichment infrastructure explicitly named as a potential target. The GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, the only conventional weapon in the American arsenal capable of reaching deeply buried hardened facilities, referenced through the language of ensuring things remain buried underground. Iran's nuclear program is now publicly inside the target set of the stated 1,000-missile package. Whether that targeting is executed depends on Iranian compliance with the Strait ultimatum and the broader diplomatic trajectory of the next 48 to 72 hours. But the public naming of the nuclear target set represents a threshold crossing in American declaratory policy that is not reversible. The words have been said, the target has been named, the weapon has been referenced, the option has been stated. Every Iranian military planner and every Iranian diplomat now calculates from a baseline in which the nuclear infrastructure is an acknowledged potential strike target, not a tacit one. The financial track added the personal dimension this week that the previous iterations of financial pressure lacked. Revoking the oil sales license attacked the institutional revenue stream. Sanctioning the financial network surrounding Khamenei personally attacks the individuals, the named people who manage the assets, move the money, maintain the financial apparatus that insulates the supreme leader's household from the economic conditions affecting the Iranian population. These are not abstract entities. They are identifiable people with identifiable accounts at identifiable financial institutions, now subject to the full weight of secondary sanction enforcement that the American Treasury system can bring to bear. Anyone in the world who does business with any named member of that network, in any currency, through any institution, faces the choice between that relationship and access to the American financial system. The personal sanction layer is designed to create defection pressure inside the inner circle itself, to make the people closest to the supreme leader calculate that their personal financial survival is better served by accommodation than by loyalty to a command structure that may not be able to protect them. This is the part of financial warfare that takes time to produce visible results, but that creates internal fracturing that external pressure alone cannot generate. When the people managing the supreme leader's personal financial infrastructure face personal sanctions, they face a choice that the supreme leader himself cannot make for them. They can maintain loyalty to an institution that is under existential military and economic pressure, or they can begin the process of protecting their own assets, their own families, their own futures, by cooperating with the pressure campaign. Historical precedent from other sanctioned regimes suggests that personal sanctions on inner circle financial managers do not produce immediate defection, but they produce exactly the kind of internal uncertainty, the internal calculation that something has to change, that eventually destabilizes even the most cohesive authoritarian inner circles. The Iranian inner circle, operating in the context of an invisible supreme leader of uncertain condition, a fractured military command, a diplomatic track being undermined by its own armed forces, and now personal sanctions. On the financial network that sustains the most powerful figures in the system is not a cohesive authoritarian inner circle. It is a collection of individuals, each calculating their own survival probability in a rapidly deteriorating situation. The command fracture track, which has now been publicly confirmed through the Iranian admission about errant hardliners, represents the most novel and, in some ways, most dangerous dimension of the current pressure picture. A regime with a unified command can be deterred, can negotiate, can make binding commitments, and enforce them. A regime in which one faction is negotiating and another faction is actively blowing up the negotiations cannot do any of those things. The deterrence logic breaks down when the entity receiving the deterrent message is not the entity controlling the military action. The negotiating logic breaks down when the negotiating partner cannot deliver compliance from its own armed forces. The United States is applying military, financial, and psychological pressure to a government that is fractured to the point where the pressure is landing on multiple competing factions whose interests are not aligned, and the faction most willing to escalate may be the one that is hardest to deter because it has already decided that the regime's survival is not the metric it is optimizing for. The honest strategic assessment of where things stand as of July 13, 2026 is this. The Islamic Republic has a supreme leader who has not been seen in 135 days, whose physical condition has been confirmed as seriously compromised by the U.S. Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence, and who communicates through telegram posts and AI-generated video content. Its most capable surviving political figure is running a diplomatic track that his own military is undermining in real time. Its fast attack boat fleet has lost more than 60 vessels in a week. Its nuclear facilities are now publicly named in an American strike package of 1,000 missiles with orders already given. Its oil revenue is frozen. Its inner circle is under personal sanctions. And the Arab states that it spent decades intimidating have entered the military conflict as independent actors, striking Iranian military targets with Allied coordination. The structural risk at the center of all of this is the command fracture itself, the gap between the entity that could theoretically agree to a deal and the entity that has the physical capability to blow up any deal the moment it is signed. That gap is what keeps the situation from resolving through negotiation. A deal with Ghalibaf's negotiating track that the IRGC Khatam al-Anbiya hardliner faction ignores is not a deal. It is a pause that the hardliner faction uses to reconstitute before the next escalation. And the United States knows this. The acknowledgement through CNN that the ship attacks came from errant hardliners was almost certainly communicated to American interlocutors with the intention of saying, the government wants a deal, but we cannot control the faction that is preventing one. The American response to that message, 1,000 missiles, orders already given, a 1-year operational commitment, is the answer to a government saying it cannot control its own military. Control it, or we will. 2 days ago, a telegram post arrived from a bunker inside Iran. It spoke of revenge, of divine missions, of operations that do not depend on the personal presence of any official. It was issued by a supreme leader who has not been photographed in 135 days, has not attended a public event in 135 days, and whose physical condition has been described by the U.S. Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence in terms that suggest someone who is seriously wounded and likely disfigured, not someone at the helm of a functioning government during the most consequential military confrontation in the Islamic Republic's history. 2 hours after that telegram post, the President of the United States posted his response on social media. 1,000 missiles locked and loaded, orders already given, a 1-year operational authorization already in place to completely decimate and destroy all areas of Iran. The telegram post was written by someone in a bunker, communicating through an app, hoping the message would be read as strength. The Truth Social post was written by a man who commands the most capable military force ever assembled in human history and who has demonstrated over the course of the past 2 weeks a willingness to use it. One of those 2 messages was a threat. The other was a status report. The Islamic Republic has 24 hours to demonstrate that it understands the difference.